Hello, and welcome to Found Threads. As I promised last time, this video will be about a drug called diphenhydramine, more commonly known as DMT. Before we get into the trip reports, I would like to discuss what exactly is DMT and the two different types that we'll be focusing on today. There are many drugs that have DMT in the name, but there's only two that are actually commonly known and referred to as DMT. The first one is NN-DMT. It is a natural compound found in many plants across the world, but most commonly the Mimosa tenuiflora. It is typically smoked or vaporized and has a very quick onset and a pretty short trip, typically lasting up to 20 minutes, but the trip does not feel like it. This drug causes severe time dilation, and the trip can feel like years or even lifetimes. It also causes strong hallucinations and strong visual and auditory distortions. There is also 5-MeO-DMT, which is known as the God molecule. It is similar to DMT in only the structure, and the effects differ strongly. It is produced by the Sonoran desert toad, but can also be made in labs. Unlike NN-DMT, 5-MeO-DMT does not cause strong visual hallucinations and is more mental. It is also known to cause ego deaths. What makes 5-MeO-DMT different from most psychedelics is that it almost completely shuts off your senses and can often make it feel as if you're in a void. It also lasts for a pretty short time compared to most psychedelics, but it feels extremely long. So how does DMT actually work? DMT works by binding to your serotonin receptors, through which it disrupts the network communications in your brain, which causes hallucinations and time dilation. In this video, I'll present you with 4 trip reports, the first 2 being about NN-DMT and the latter 2 being about 5-MeO-DMT. So now that we have the boring scientific segment out of the way, let's actually get into the trip reports. So the first one we have is Touched by God by Kevin. Ever since I was 15 years old, I discovered drugs. I made a list of what seemed interesting. Soon, I discovered psychedelic drugs that opened the mind to a new perspective. I made a list of what I would want to use and what not. I added DMT to my list of do's, but to be careful with. I knew I could not just use DMT without preparation and wisdom gained from lesser psychoactive drugs. I was only 15 years old, and the idea scared me. For 6 years, I grew used to mind-altering psychedelic drugs. I started with marijuana, then psilocybin mushrooms. I used them twice and lost control once. I knew I was not ready, and I was still scared. Last year, I used LSD once, on a low dose. I controlled it, so I knew it was time, and I was excited to the idea of using DMT. So, in summer of 2013, when I was 21 years old, I visited a good friend who had made NN-DMT himself. It wasn't pure, he said. It was about 70% DMT and 30% chemical residue. He has been my friend for over 10 years now, so he told me the risks truthfully and said, "So how about it?" I got scared and thought to myself, "Wait, you mean now?" "Now," he said. He told me he tried using it himself, but he has weak lungs. He couldn't hold the DMT smoke long enough to break through, but he knew my lungs could take a lot more. He was right. I asked him, should we go outside to the park? He looked at me with a frown and said, "You sure you know what DMT will do to you? You won't be able to walk at all." I didn't really comprehend what that meant. I figured it was just like being really high. So I asked him, should I light a joint during the DMT trip? Again, he frowned and said, "My friend, you won't be able to do anything at all. You'll be gone, man. Gone from Earth." In retrospect, I don't think I knew what that meant. The room I was in was a student dorm. A small one, maybe 10 square meters. His room was decorated with psychedelic art and classy paintings. He played the Sacred Spirit album from his laptop and dimmed the lights. I got really nervous and, truthfully, more than a little scared. He told me, "Take 3 hits, full hits. Keep it in your lungs for as long as you can." So I asked him for the pipe. He told me, "No, I'll hold it, you just hit. Now go sit on the bed, you'll fall down." So that's what I did. He took the pipe. Most junky pipe I have ever witnessed in my life. It was a homemade plastic crack pipe. I looked at him and said, "Seriously?" He filled it with over 50 milligrams of DMT, excluding the residue that was still in the pipe, and preheated it. Smoke was coming out now, and I was nerve-wracked. "Hit it," he said. So I leaned closer and took a hit for over 3 seconds. The smoke was in my lungs for only 2, and it hit me like a bulldozer. It felt terrible. The worst smoke I have ever had in my life, like plastic burning in my lungs. I started to hallucinate heavily. Eyes were opening in the curtains. The walls were starting to vibrate. I could hear my friend say, "One more time," but I couldn't see him. His voice was heavily altered, like it was being played through a computer and being played with. The pitch was lower, and it was like he talked in slow motion. So I hit it again. This time, I was starting to get really dizzy and heavy. A faint noise was starting to arise in the room, much like sound distortion. I felt like I had trouble breathing and now started sweating. I couldn't hear the music anymore and could barely see anything, but the sound distorting was getting louder. I knew I didn't have long. "One more time," he said, so I took a third hit and fell. I could hear him say, "One more time," and with all the strength I could muster, I answered, "No, enough." But it was like I spoke in slow motion. The sound distorting was embracing me like a mother embracing her child. I felt strange. I didn't comprehend what was happening to me. What is this? Where am I? What happened? I asked all the when, why, and what questions. I could still feel my body sweating, and it felt like my nose was bleeding, but I couldn't move, and slowly it felt like I could feel the DMT move through my body, and everywhere it came, it killed me. It was cold. I couldn't feel my arms at first. Then I couldn't feel my legs, and lastly, I couldn't feel my heart and breath. I was alone in my mind, and there was nothing but my thoughts. Thoughts I thought. Must be what death is like. Am I dying? Wake up. Please wake up. Please wake up. I didn't. I tried waking up for what felt like an hour. No good. Did I become my friend's experiment? Did he kill me? No, having a corpse in his bed would get him in serious trouble. Then I must have accidentally took too much. Yes, that's it. You took too much DMT. I am the first person dying on DMT. What a waste. There's so much I wanted to do with life. Surely I wasn't always grateful for life, but I didn't want to die. No. What's that? A voice. You idiot. You are dying. You took too much. What would your parents say? There's a girl in your house expecting you to come home tomorrow, and you know what? You'll never see her again. You'll never have anything but your thoughts. But I tried everything. I tried waking up. Let's give up. Fine. Let this be my end. My life would have been brief, but I lived my life the way I wanted to. I had a good life. It felt like my consciousness was being lifted from my dead body and sent at light speed through the universe. I kept going and going and going for what seemed like years, and then there was this dark place, and I had no physical form. I was the shattering of my ego, thousands of pieces floating through space. My memories, my feelings, my ego. I played a piece of my memories. I relived it like it was happening at that very moment. I was a little boy walking to my mother on a sunny day. I was happy and wanted to be embraced with the love of my mother. I felt like I was starting to cry, but there was no body to cry with. I relived moments of my life. My first kiss, meeting my friends, being bullied, my first fight. I felt everything. I started to get control over my shattered ego floating in space. My first thought was, not where am I, but when am I? I'm not a believer of reincarnation, but it felt like this is where souls go to wait for rebirth. I felt a presence. I felt he felt that I could feel his presence. I wanted to meet him, and instead of moving through space, space moved around me, and I started going forward. What I encountered next was beautiful. A floating ball of light. It was huge, like a red giant in comparison to planet Earth, and it made colors and shapes with tentacles of light. Millions of tentacles of light going everywhere. I saw colors and shapes I have never witnessed before. It was profound. Tentacles started going my way, towards my shattered ego. And then it touched me, and I learned all the secrets of existence. Images flashed in my head. Men, aliens, gas, colors, murder, sex, TV, propaganda, the news, pain and suffering, technology, the past, the present, and the future. The formula, the math behind existence became mine, and I realized all that is but perspective in an infinitely large universe. I am God, and I am man. I am the devil, and I am the saint. All that I see and all that I enemy is our ignorance. We kill and hurt because we don't understand. These people we kill and hurt are not bad. They're different. They have a different perspective. Western society has taught me prejudice, has taught me so-called good and wrong, but they're just one of many perspectives in the universe, and maybe just no one is right, not even me. I started to hear music and chanting. I could feel my body become whole again, and slowly I could feel the sweat on my face and the pain in my lungs. I opened my eyes and I could see the eyes on the curtains stare at me. I felt very light, and I started to speak. Water. A man was sitting next to me. He was chanting and appeared to make a sign in the air, almost like he was conjuring up magic. His face was covered in a mask of a light color. It seemed familiar. He gave me a glass of water and kept chanting. His long blonde hair was whirling. It fascinated me. Just like his chanting and singing, I drank it. It felt good. The memories of my breakthrough started coming to me. I lay down on the bed and smiled. I felt great. I traveled and found the truth. I could already feel it changed me forever. A familiar voice. "Are you okay? How was it?" he asked me calmly. I was back. The after effects. I am one of you, a perspective in this increasingly mad and dangerous world. But I hate no longer. Hate is for the unloved and the unnatural. So as you can see from the first trip report, DMT is different from normal psychedelics because it doesn't just give you visual hallucinations like LSD for example, but it shuts you off from the real world and makes a new one around you. And it's also way more like spiritual and way more ego breaking than LSD. Like this guy thinks he discovered all the secrets to the universe, and maybe he did, we'll never know. So the second one we have for NN-DMT is Masters of the Universe by Lucid. First, a little background information to provide you with some context for the trip. This experience was going to be the second DMT trip of my life, and I was extremely excited for it. Feeling a definite charge through my body as I picked up the ball and contemplated the hit, and what it was going to do to me. Having just had my first DMT experience 24 hours earlier, I was more than aware of the incredible rush that was going to blast me immediately after the hit, and to be honest, I was a little intimidated by it. During the first experience, I blasted through the veil immediately and was thrown out into this gigantic open space, where I was shown innumerable images and events. The emotions I was experiencing in that place were that I was home, and that I have been there so many times before. These were some of, if not the strongest emotions I have ever felt in my life. It had felt like an incredible revelation was thrown in my face, and yet it was the most obvious thing ever to me. I was jubilant, and you can easily see from the first trip why I was so excited for the second one. Anyway, to the trip. 6:40 p.m. In my friend's lounging room with all the lights off and with 7 or 8 candles burning. 3 close friends are present, and my mindset all day has been gearing towards preparing for this moment. My previous trip left me with an incredible sense that I needed to trip again, almost as if I was being called back into the DMT lands to be shown more. The DMT is packed into a water pipe, with a thin layer of weed above it and below it for buffer. After taking about 15 minutes to meditate and get myself centered, I decided it's go time. Empty my lungs and lean forward to the pipe. Taking one gigantic hit is the style I have adopted for smoking DMT, and as I released the smoke and leaned back into the couch, reality melted away. It disappeared as though I was passing backwards through a portal. Total tunnel vision. Simultaneously, I was experiencing/hearing the loudest, most electric shredding sound I have ever heard in my life. It must have been the fabrics of time shredding, because after this moment I was no longer in the physical realm. 6:41 to 6:46. This is the part of the trip that I have the most trouble recalling, and it was no doubt the most intense part as well. I distinctly remember the feeling of being home again. I was definitely, no question, in the same place that I had gone to on my first trip, and even further down the rabbit hole this time. I was feeling the feeling of infinity, much stronger than my first trip, and it seemed like I belonged in this realm this time around. I was there for so long, it really cannot be put into words. In fact, my entire trip consisted of 2 distinctly different experiences, one in body and one out of the body, but both of which lasted what seemed like an eternity. Unfortunately for me, I do not remember much about what I saw in this place, but what I was able to bring back with me was that I remembered the choice I was given when I left this place. I distinctly remember having the choice to stay in this amazing place for another eternity, or I could return to my body. In fact, up until this point, I hadn't even considered my body or this world. But the moment I had these thoughts that the drug would surely be wearing off soon and I'll be returning to my body, my consciousness snapped back into our physical realm. 6:46 to 6:47. Now, this is where the trip gets really crazy. At this point, my consciousness is back in the room where I had started with my 3 friends, except that this is not really the room at all. Instead, I notice that we're all kind of floating in this beautifully golden aqueous space, similar to the wavy background in PS3. And I immediately understand that this has to be the place where reality is constructed. I try to sense my body, but it's completely impossible, and I feel completely separate from it. I look around to try and see my body, and I can make out my legs, but they're what seems like many yards down and to the right of me. I look to my friends, but they do not look like they normally would. I can see who they are perfectly, but instead of their bodies, they are so abstract that I don't even know what words would do it justice. My friends are clearly having a loud conversation with each other, except that the words make absolutely no sense to me, and they sound like the craziest combination of hundreds of languages. They are radiating this aura of power, and I feel as though I'm in the presence of some kind of council, except that they are not here to judge me, but rather to offer me support and reassure me. There are many other sounds going on in the room, echoes sounding off in all sorts of different pitches. Everything had an incredible alien feel to it. I distinctly remember being there and listening to their pure gibberish conversation for a very, very long time. And then out of nowhere it hit me. The mega granddaddy DMT revelation. Literally, as if thunderstruck, I am blasted with the overwhelming emotion that we, meaning myself and my friends in the room, are projecting the reality we know as life together. And even further than that, I can remember feeling the other guys' energy within me. And I was overwhelmed with the notion that we are really only one entity experiencing whatever we want to in this physical realm. Like constructing a play of ourselves to enjoy or to learn from. 6:48 to 6:52. It was after this wave of emotion hit me that I really began to melt away again. It seemed as though the room and my friends' physical existences could not be there when I stopped paying attention to them. But then, as soon as I wanted to be back in the room, I could be, and it would rematerialize before my eyes. I continued to toy around with this newfound ability until I was abruptly struck back fully into the physical world. It was at this point that I opened my eyes and took my first look around the actual room I had started in. And I realized what was coming next before it even started. You see, during my first DMT out-of-body experience, after my consciousness returned to the body, I went through a spell of about 5 minutes where I was shaking violently and consistently, but all the while I felt immensely calm and even pleasurable. As I predicted, this happened again. For about 6 minutes my entire body vibrated with this incredible energy force that I had never felt besides when re-entering my body on DMT. It felt like pure ecstasy charging through my body as my soul re-enters my flesh. After the 6 minutes, I settle down into my body and my skin starts to feel like it's glowing with the heat. My head feels supercharged. Immediately following the trip, one of my friends had a notebook and pencil handy and decided to start jotting down everything I was rambling on about. This turned out to be an incredible tool when I wanted to go back and remember the certain aspects of the trip. Because there are certain key words or emotions in the note that will trigger entire memories from the trip. It also helped a great deal in making this journal. Really, the main thing I want to discuss from the post-trip conversation I had with my friends is this. As I was explaining to them that I had sat and watched them carry out an alien conversation of gibberish for what seemed like hours, they told me that I had in fact not opened my eyes to watch them at all during my trip, and that they had hardly uttered more than a few words to each other, and when they did, they whispered quietly to not disturb me. This revelation absolutely blew me out of the water. Did this mean I was really watching them the entire time through my third eye instead of my physical eyes? So as you can see, this trip is pretty similar to the last one. He was also in the void, and he also felt as if his ego had shattered and as if he had no more body. And he also felt as if he had discovered the secrets of the universe. So now that we're done with the DMT trips, let's move on to the 5-MeO DMT trips, which is considered to be more intense. So, the first trip report about 5-MeO DMT is Thrashing in Paradise by Lunar Pursuit. My journey with toad medicine was without question the most intense and impactful psychedelic experience I ever had. Let's start with a bit of context. I was aware of the toad for years, but I have never pursued it. Like ayahuasca, I was fascinated, as it seemed both exotic and intense, and I enjoyed reading about other people's experiences with it. I suppose I placed it in the if it was meant to happen, it'll happen category. In the meantime, an DMT was readily available and provided me with ample opportunity for travel and exploration of itself. A small group of close friends were organizing a trip to Mexico, and I was informed that a toad medicine ceremony would be happening while there. Some of these friends had experienced this previously, in the same location, a beachfront property near Tulum, with the same shaman. For that reason, I felt like it was a good opportunity for me. I would be with close and trusting friends in a safe place, and could lean on their expertise to prepare for the experience. Fast forward to Mexico. The property is beautiful and secluded, miles away from tourist attractions in Tulum. We are all settled in and present, enjoying each other's company, spending our days on the beach and the nights cooking and eating together. I knew the shaman would be coming in a few days. I knew that some of us would be partaking, a few were on the fence and some would sit this one out. I generally wasn't thinking about it too much. I was a little nervous, but didn't want to put this experience on a pedestal. There was no sense in worrying about it, right? The shaman arrived for dinner. He was friends with some of our friends, and it put me at ease to see them embrace, as they clearly had some history. I introduced myself and we chatted for a bit. I can't deny that I was a little intimidated by his presence. How often do you have dinner with a shaman? He'd be returning the following evening for the ceremony. He gave me a few general pointers. Eat a clean diet for the next days. Stick to fruits and vegetables, don't drink alcohol, and try to set an intention for the experience. I did not talk through my concerns with him. I wasn't sure what they were. I had a general healthy fear of this significant and potentially life-changing experience ahead of me. The following day we went out on a long boat ride. Everyone else was drinking and celebrating, but I stayed sober and felt a bit somber. I struggled to be fully present on this expedition, as I was feeling nervous about the toad experience on the horizon. I believed my anxiety was mainly related to control, or the lack thereof. Historically, with any psychedelic situation, I am on my own timeline and in control of the source, the dosage, the setting, the timing, etc. This time, I was not in control. We got back to the property to meet with the shaman, and it turns out he isn't there yet. He was on his own timeline, and therefore he was in control of mine. All I could do was wait. I went on a long walk on the beach alone and watched the moon rise. It was a beautiful evening with brilliant stars and a warm breeze gently shaking the palm trees. I was anxious and killing time, not fully appreciative of my surroundings. I closed on a general intention of being fully present for this experience, with a hope that this could help me be more present in my daily life with my family, at work, etc. I hope to take experiences as they come and bask in them, rather than speeding up the present moment in anticipation for the future. The shaman arrived about 2 hours late. He had us all sit in a circle on the sand under the beautiful night sky. The consistent sound of waves crashing behind us was both soothing and eerie. A few friends were also present, sitting outside the circle. They weren't there to partake in the medicine, but rather to hold space. He spoke for a bit about the origins of the medicine, how he got involved with it, how it turned into his life's work, and how to open ourselves to the experience. He told us that he had extracted the medicine from Colorado River toads in the Sonoran Desert, and how the medicine differs from traditional DMT or ayahuasca, which are both plant-based. I did my best to follow along, but between his somewhat broken English and the sound of the wind and waves, I heard about 50% of what he said. The shaman spoke for about an hour and a half. After some time, I found myself wishing we could get it over with, much like sitting in the waiting room as a child with my mother, knowing that I'd be getting a shot from the doctor. My anxiety had me waiting to just get it over with as quickly as possible. Some of those sitting outside of the circle, holding space, had tried the toad previously, while the others had not. I found myself wondering why they had such patience to sit here for so long and listen to the shaman speak. He showed us the pipe he'd be using. I recognized this as a crack pipe and felt another tingle of anxiety/vague guilt. He explained that he would come sit with us, one at a time, to prepare the medicine and help us smoke it. He started making his way around the circle. He spent anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes with each person. He'd use his headlamp to take some medicine, shards of crystallized toad venom, out of a small tin, load it into the pipe, heat it up with a torch, and help was the smoking process. Deep inhale, deeper than you think you can breathe. Then shrug your shoulders as you breathe it even deeper. Hold, exhale, and immediately take another hit. Repeat 3-4 times. As he finished up with someone, they would gently lay back onto their yoga mat and he'd move along to the next person. I tried not to stare too long at any of these interactions, as I wanted to respect people's experiences and give them privacy, but I couldn't look away completely. I observed the folks that would lie down rapidly, and some of them moaned or laughed a bit. He finally came to me. He had a gentle, caring disposition, and spoke softly. He asked me how I was feeling, and whether I had smoked anything before, to get a sense of how much help I'd need breathing the harsh smoke deep in and holding it. Well, this was it. There was no turning around now. He pinched a few small shards out of the tin and placed them into the pipe. As he hit it with the torch, it filled with white, milky smoke. I had butterflies in my stomach. As he brought the torch to my mouth, I took a few very deep hits. The smoke was warm and mildly unpleasant, although not intolerable. It smelled a bit like a burnt tortilla. I exhaled, and he immediately held the pipe up again, encouraging me to breathe in as deeply as possible, and then breathe even more in, until I couldn't possibly take any more. Between the first and second hit, my visual field began to distort, and I noticed a physical buzz like gentle electricity. After the third hit, I began to lie back. I think that was partially me surrendering to the effects, and partially to back away from the pipe a bit. I think someone was behind me, helping me to recline, but I'm not entirely sure. I could feel an intense energy taking hold, and there was nothing subtle about the effects. As I laid back and closed my eyes, I still had some grasp on my surroundings. I was still in the physical realm, aware of my body, and was lucid enough that I considered telling the shaman, I'm still here to ask for more medicine. I didn't want to be greedy or tempt fate any more than I already have, so I stayed quiet. I figured perhaps the medicine would intensify or take off in the coming moments. I did my best to be fully present and surrender the experience, but the nagging thought persisted that I perhaps had not inhaled deeply enough, and as the effects slowly faded, I was a little disappointed that I hadn't pushed any further. I was sitting with these thoughts as the folks around me slowly returned from their experiences. Did I not go into this with the right intentions? Is preparation really that circumstantial in feeling the full effects of the toad medicine? Sure, the effects were intense, but it was more of a visual experience. Along the lines of an DMT, it felt a lot like a setup or a preparation for the predictable experience. What's wrong with me? Why can't I enjoy the beautiful settings and the unique opportunity for what it is? Why can't I just be present? As the shaman began to speak again, I was surprised to learn that we had gone through a warm-up round, that this wasn't the full experience. Wow, okay, that explains it. I felt relieved and then immediately intimidated again. He explained that this first round was to get to a base layer of medicine in the body and to teach us how to properly smoke it. Some folks opted out of the round too. For a brief moment I considered tapping out as well. Then it dawned on me that this unique opportunity may not present itself a second time. I noticed a lingering buzz and some mild visual distortions remained. The moon and the stars had glowing rings around them. I conferred with my friend Y for a moment, as he was holding space nearby. He encouraged me to embrace the experience and to just let it go. The shaman began to make his way around the circle again. This time around, the plumes of toad smoke were noticeably larger. I could smell and taste it. I had a strange feeling of connectivity, like the medicine was already in me and was waiting to be activated. When he returned to me, I told him I was ready for more. It seems that he received my message loud and clear, though I suspect he knew how much medicine I needed without hearing my words. This time around, each inhale was dramatic. I breathed in so deeply that my shoulders hunched and my eyes widened. I didn't know that I could have breathed any deeper if my life depended on it. After my third heavy exhale, I began to lean back once again. I think someone had their hands on me and guided me back, but I'm not sure of that. I felt supported. The shaman was still with me, and I could feel those holding space around me. The onset of noticeable effects was rapid. It went from 0 to 60 in about 5 seconds. My field of vision began to shake and blur, and while there were some interesting visual distortions, I couldn't pay much attention to them, as there was something else more significant happening. My breaths became audible, and probably a bit dramatic. There was nothing subtle about what was happening to me this time around. As I leaned back further, I began to relinquish control, and myself spilled across the ground behind me like a bucket of paint. I felt like I was being smeared across infinity. It quickly became apparent that I was dealing with something very real, infinitely more real and tangible than any prior psychedelic experience. As I realized I was no longer in control, my slightly audible breaths escalated into louder sighs of concern. What does it sound like to exhale to the tune of "oh no"? That's what it sounded like. I felt compelled to be vocal, as if someone was encouraging me to push out sounds. This experience was now beyond comprehension. Any grasp on the earthly concept of control disintegrated, along with my field of vision, my sense of self, place, and time. All of these were gone. I was no longer there to even understand what these things were anymore. And that was it. I had finally done it. My casual dabbling with psychedelics brought me down this path. I had finally taken it too far. I poked the bear one too many times, and now I got what I deserve. I knew that nothing would ever be the same from this moment on for the rest of eternity. My ego shattered into a million pieces of nothingness. I had fully released control of everything and disintegrated. I didn't let go, but rather, by opening myself to this experience, all control was torn away from me. I wasn't in the driver's seat, or even in the passenger seat. I was hogtied and thrown into the trunk. This sensation led into what I can only describe as a whiteout. Unlike an alcohol blackout, I was lucid in some capacity, but there was no me. There was no beach, there was no sky full of stars or nighttime. All of the energy around me was sucked into a blender and pixelated into nothingness. There was nothing. It's very difficult to describe the next part of the experience, but I'll try to account for it. I don't know whether it was 2 minutes or 10 minutes later, but I felt like I was suddenly hooked up to a glowing fire hose of information, feeding me an incomprehensible amount of critical information that I could not consume. Terabytes of alien data were flowing through me faster than the speed of light. I couldn't even attempt to understand it all or process what I was receiving, but I do recall pieces of myself being highlighted in front of me. My identity is tied up in being a runner. I take pride in making people laugh. I take pride in my own work. These basic concepts appeared in front of me and were presented as a symbol. They were briefly highlighted in some capacity as they quickly flew by. It was like someone was going through an old box of significant items, holding each one up briefly, inspecting it, before tossing it into a dumpster. I was not aware of this while it was happening, but during this cosmic slideshow, my moaning had turned into a carnal scream. My loud "oh no" moans had turned into all-out screaming. I felt like someone was beaconing carnal feelings out of me, like a conductor leading a symphony of emotion. Some of this memory was formed by observers describing it to me later, but I remember feeling strongly encouraged to expel something, even though I do not remember screaming at the time. I vaguely recall bizarre harmonies, like modem tunes, behind the noise I was making. I was the one making all of the noise, but someone was there with me, encouraging it and shaping it, as it erupted out of me. The emotion was exploding out of me with such force, like a controllable vomiting, truly a full release of everything. Meanwhile, I was receiving giant packages of information about human concepts like love, sexuality, race, money, reputations, vanity, etc. I was somehow aware of these abstract themes, but I didn't have time or ability to process anything deeper. It was like I was watching them fly by on a conveyor belt. I felt like all prejudices and assumptions, however deep in my subconscious, were being expelled and recalibrated. In retrospect, it felt like a kind of firmware update for my subconscious. It was very overwhelming, like an alien script coming in backwards and upside down at 10x speed, and I was trying to decipher it and read it out loud. In retrospect, I suppose I was reading it out loud. When my scream subsided, I was just flopping around on the beach and babbling. I'm told that I sounded like I was speaking in tongues. I have no recollection of that. When I began to return to my physical self, the first thing I noticed was the pleasant sound of the Charman's harp. Soon after, I felt something in my hands and realized I was gripping fistful of sand. Then I noticed soreness in my arms and legs and realized I had been flailing around a bit as the sand was dug up around me. My throat was sore too. This was not the condition I left my body in before I smoked the pipe. I felt like I was waking up after a war, inside the foundation of an old house that had collapsed. I slowly came up, flopping my arms around and letting go of the sand that had been squeezing in them. I was tripping out on how it felt to feel my own body. I mumbled, "Oh man," a few times as I remembered who was around me. I became aware of my friend Y first. When I looked back at him, I felt this deep compassion and understanding. His smile told me that he knew exactly what I had gone through. People holding space who had experienced this before knew precisely what I just had experienced. I felt like I had a connection with them in some deep, profound way, that my entire being was exposed to them along the way. In that moment, I was fully convinced that they saw me for who I truly was in my experience, and that all of my flaws, prejudices, ugliness, weaknesses were exposed. I felt like they saw them and still accepted me. I felt overwhelming love and connection at that moment, unlike anything I ever felt before. I now understand why they are so generous with their time while holding space. Y looked at me and his eyes said everything. Basically, yeah dude, I know. I hugged him and told him that he was my brother. I don't normally say things like that to people, but those were the only words I could muster, and that felt right. My friend was sitting next to me, and I began to listen to the tail end of his experience. He sounded like a small child talking to an imaginary friend. He seemed calm and happy, mentioned something about seeing this in a movie. I was struck by how he seemed relaxed, happy, and filled with awe. This seemed like the opposite of my experience. I had strong, lingering visual distortions. There was a large glowing ring of light around the moon, and I saw ripples and waves in the clouds. At any other time in my life, these visuals would have been significant, but they were paled out in comparison to the intensity of what I had just experienced on my journey, which went way beyond the visual field. As everyone returned to their bodies, we stood in a circle and held hands. I felt disoriented, like I was still transitioning into my body. Everyone was asked to share something about their experiences, regardless whether they had taken the medicine or held space. I wasn't sure what to say, but I felt like any prejudice or assumption about my friends here, old and new, had melted away. And so I had said something about how I was excited to get to know each of you, or to relearn who you are. As I said this, I noticed that my voice was hoarse, and it dawned on me that I must have been shouting. I didn't process much of my experience that night. I had so many questions, but was also overstimulated and exhausted. Some of my friends stayed up playing cards and drinking, but I went to bed shortly after the shaman left. I don't think I understood what ego death meant before this experience, but it dawned on me the following day that this was precisely what I had experienced. A complete and total loss of self. In retrospect, I really had no idea what I was getting into, but I don't think anyone could have prepared me for the magnitude of this experience. The shaman came back to the property for dinner a few days later. I had a visceral reaction when I first saw him. It reminded me of being a child and seeing a strict teacher while at a school basketball game on a weekend. In the weeks that followed, I felt much more present and calm. I didn't feel so compelled to fill every moment with productivity. I felt more cognizant in my thoughts and patterns. In situations where I might have responded negatively, I would catch myself and reconsider my approach. I also felt like I had a better handle on my alcohol consumption, drinking slowly and enjoying it. I do think I could have focused on reintegration a bit more, as these things have faded with time. I wrote it all out as a linear story, but I didn't immediately recall it all so clearly. Some of it was recounted to me by others, like the guttural screaming and the subsequent speaking in tongues. I was told that I looked like I was trying to dig to the center of earth, but I have no recollection of screaming or digging. Some of these things, like the chanting, I vaguely remember only after being told about it. Other parts of the experience have came back to me at random moments in the weeks and months that followed. A few nights ago, my wife was trying to get some raccoons out of our yard with a broom and was making a whooshing noise to scare them away. I immediately recalled a similar noise made by the shaman as I re-entered my body. Her swooshing completely stopped me in my tracks. I didn't recall the shaman making such a noise until I heard it from her. I'm reminded of this experience on a regular basis. I still have scars on my ankles from thrashing around in the sand. Anytime I smell tortillas being cooked, I'm immediately taken back to the yoga mats under the stars. It has been more than half a year since my toad experience, and I'm still processing it. I may never understand it, but I'll certainly never forget it. So in this one, this guy had a pretty good experience, I would say, but it's very likely that's because he was already pretty experienced with normal DMT, so this one didn't feel as strong to him, and also because he was in a very good setting and in a very professional setting. But the next one is completely different. So the next one we'll be reading, and the last one for today, is Existential Horror by Barley. I'm a 41-year-old, 185-pound male. Though I have once had taken about 20 milligrams of 5-MeO DMT, the psychoactive results were negligible. So I consider the following to be an account of my first real encounter with this substance. 8:31 p.m. With the aid of my sitter, call him John, I held a glass pipe to my lips and drew a very long, slow drag until I could hold no more. I saw a wisp of alarmingly white smoke rise from the pipe before it was blown away by the large white cloud I exhaled. Just as John secured the pipe out of my hand, I felt the onset. I let go of the pipe, letting myself fall back onto John's inordinately comfortable couch. And then, all within a matter of a few seconds, was launched into the peak experience of the trip. Words now fail, of course, and to a lesser extent so does my memory of these 4-day-old events. I know that I felt a tremendous surge of energy through my entire body. At first from my heart, or was it my brain, exploding out of my extremities, then imploding back. Electric chair power, it seemed now. Yet, as I imploded back, it was as though I disintegrated, got shuffled, then lost all concept of my physical body and the physical world surrounding it. Again, this is all within the first moments. There was a tremendous sound, that of a tornado or jet engine. The visuals were very jumbly, a swirling, cracked mirror geometry with black and white and yellow and some red. The flag of Maryland and a washing machine seemed to move, to radiate very fast, yet hardly to change, mild as hallucinatory images go. That which was not mild in any way was the emotional, mental, spiritual effect. My entire being, my soul, I suppose, began to scream in anguish, in terror, in horror. This surely was the worst place in the universe for a human soul to be. I can't say why or how or what this was. It doesn't translate to our consciousness reality. I just know that it took me utterly and horribly. I wanted to get out of there with every fiber of my being. After what was maybe 2 or 3 minutes of this, I came to believe that I was in fact in hell. Hell, the real place. No red demons with pitchforks, no fire, no frozen lakes. Just pure, non-stopping, overwhelming spiritual torment. And it was to be eternal. I believed, not in the way that we normally think or have a notion, but rather as an indisputable truth in the core of my small, small self, that I had made some huge mistake in my life, or bartered my soul away. These painful insights peered through the non-stop rage of the whole thing. Then the first real-world imagery came through. John's face, his eyelids were oddly askew. He had procured and prepared the powder for me, therefore I knew at the time he was the devil. No, he was the devil. The devil exists, and he is John. He tricked me into doing this, and now I'm paying with my soul, damned to everlasting existential torment. If not the devil, then maybe some sort of vampire. I was suddenly vaguely conscious of my body again, that I was lying back on the couch with my neck very exposed. I was beginning to come back down, to leave hell. 8:38 p.m. To a slow syncopation, the rage subsided. I was still frequently overcome by waves of terror, but the spaces in between them were familiar and quiet and dark, each one blessedly longer than the last. I noticed that my mouth was open and very dry. I couldn't muster the strength, or the know-how, for that matter, to reach for or ask for my glass of water. The predicament got me to think about my hands and fingers, my feet, cold. I was not comfortable with my body position on the couch, but I couldn't yet move. My heart was pounding, as was my forehead. I was inhaling vast, deep breaths, then pushing the air out with all force I could muster, as if I were pushing out the drag, the devil, the experience, and anything that could be pushed out. After a few minutes, I knew that I could move my left hand. The first chore was to rub, deep slowly, my clenching, throbbing forehead. The terror continued to pass. My ego came back roaring and tried to strategize its way back to ascendancy, encouraging me to lighten up, or to become self-conscious, worrying about what the appropriate first words to John might be, wondering what he saw. I was exhausted as I began to feel familiar psychological crutches clicking themselves back into place. The crutches of Dali never have made much sense before. I bent one knee, then the other, getting my feet flat on the floor for a time, then letting them slide. I remained frightened. I pleaded with the universe that I might never have to experience that again. I felt mild, occasional tremors run down an arm or a leg or side, and the very slightest nausea. John had told me before we had begun that he wouldn't say anything to me until I spoke to him. Perhaps I indulged this. I felt as though I wanted to sleep. Then John's phone rang. 9:30 p.m. John raced to turn down the answering machine, and I mustered a chuckle. "You alright?" he ventured. "Yeah," I breathed, and after a moment, that was hell. "You know it's been an hour." I thought it had been somewhat shorter, maybe 40 minutes. He told me that I must have metabolized tryptamines, such as this, at about half the normal rate, that most folks would have been up and conversationable within a half an hour. Your throat must be sore. I accepted his offer for a cup of chamomile tea, which soon appeared in a mug featuring a Marilyn-branded illustration and the words "snap out of it." John rejoined me on the couch, and I asked him if I had said or done anything in this world during my trip to that one. He smiled and explained I had screamed, at the top of my lungs, from the bottom of my guts, non-stop for about 6 minutes, mostly saying no and occasionally please, among other words. He continued that I was among the 1 in 6 who physically moved during this experience, and that my movement consisted of rocking back and forth, slapping both hands back and forth from the top of my thighs to my forehead. It was that all the furniture, all the breakables, with anything with a hard edge on it was far to the side of me. He hadn't interrupted nor attempted to restrain me at the time. He said, because I didn't seem to be hurting myself, which was true. He told me that he had been about 5 or 6 minutes away from calling 911 when I sat up, looked him in the face, and screamed with the intention of every shard of my existence that he was the devil and that he should get fucked. Shortly after, sinking silently back into the couch. After a while he had seen my left hand move and knew that I was alright. He went on to explain that he was not, in fact, the devil, though he had been called the Antichrist by some several years ago, under somewhat similar circumstances. We reasoned together about the circumstances that may have brought about such a dark episode when an experience of absolute bliss, followed by joyous weeping, more typically follows this powder's ingestion. John gently cautioned me of the tracks of fate and design. 1:40 p.m. Feeling about 90% back to base level, I found that I could stand and the standing felt good, and that 2 mugs of chamomile tea and a glass of water later, it was also good that I could make my way to the bathroom. I told John that I had not yet been able to decide whether or not to thank him, that I had appreciated his vigilance. I wasn't yet entirely convinced of his earthly morality. I got into my car and drove home, avoiding freeways by driving through the center of town. It had just been festooned with lights for the winter holidays. Arriving home, my wife smiled at me and said offhandedly, "So, you shattered." Seeing and hearing from me that I had in fact been through hell, she enveloped me with her matchless love and warmth and supported me. She made me another cup of herbal tea and slice of peanut butter toast, and we went to bed, with my heart and my forehead still pounding, with my palpable fear that should I give over my subconscious to dreaming, I might revisit the terror, and with my bladder in need of frequent emptying of all the tea, I didn't sleep until about 4:30 a.m. November 23rd. I was only able to sleep about 3 hours. I woke up shaky, cautious, beat up. Throughout the day, which included a 2-hour business meeting, I experienced intensified colors and contrasts and the occasional wave of terror. These would start in my gut or groin, roll up into my head, and I found that were best released with a quiet but open scream. I never knew my jaw could open that wide. I became frightened that these waves might accompany me for the rest of my days, and frightened of eternal damnation. In the late afternoon, I smoked some cannabis, which proved to be a great blessing. Most of my fear left. I relaxed. I took great joy in simple acts of walking the dog and preparing food. Finally, at about 24 hours after takeoff, I felt to be about 100% at baseline consciousness. I was asleep by midnight and racked up a good 9 or 10 hours of sleep. I woke up the next day feeling fantastic, bright and cheerful, happy and thankful to be alive, to have this human body and this life on this beautiful planet, meek in my knowledge of the limitations of human subconsciousness. I'll continue to wrestle with the ontology of the whole thing for some time, I suspect, and try not to think too much about my new fear. I look forward to a particularly rich Thanksgiving. So as you can see, this final trip report was immensely more terrifying than the previous ones. And this is probably due to the fact that it was his first real time trying 5-MeO DMT. So yeah, these are the 4 trip reports we had today. I really hope you enjoyed this video, guys, and I'm really trying to keep the schedule of posting 1 video a week. So next week at around the same time, please be expecting the next one.